The ventilation hum of the Nexus drift had become my lullaby over the past 3 cycles. I sat in the communal observation deck, my uniform perfectly mimicking the biosynthetic fabric worn by the Keth delegation. My modified vocal cords produced their harmonic frequencies flawlessly, and the subcutaneous translators I'd implanted made every conversation feel natural. To them, I was just another junior diplomat from the Outer Rim colonies, unremarkable, forgettable. The holographic star charts flickered above us, displaying our route through the neutral corridor between the hegemony and the coalition territories. Ambassador Vexhi's secondary breathing slits fluttered nervously as he whispered to his aide, the chitinous plates along his neck darkening to a deep purple. "The manifest discrepancies are troubling," he hissed in their native tongue. "One too many life signatures detected during the last sensor sweep." I pretended to study my datapad while listening to every word. The mess hall buzzed with tension 3 hours later. I spooned the protein gel that passed for food aboard this vessel, watching as clusters of aliens huddled in whispered conversations. The Zefti delegation sat separate from the Keth, their crystalline carapaces refracting the overhead lights into prismatic patterns across the metallic walls. Even the normally stoic Drachmor representatives seemed agitated, their reptilian features twisted into expressions I'd learned to recognize as concern. "Something's wrong," muttered Diplomat Thenoris, sliding into the seat across from me. His 4 eyes darted around the room before settling on my face. "Security performed 3 separate sweeps of Deck 7 yesterday. They found biotraces that don't match anyone on the crew manifest." I nodded sympathetically, allowing a hint of worry to creep into my voice. "Perhaps it's just contamination from the last port." His head tentacles twitched a sign of disagreement. "No, this is something else. Something they're not telling us." The emergency council meeting was called at 0400 ship time, rousing everyone from their sleep cycles. I shuffled into the main conference chamber alongside the other junior staff, noting how the senior diplomats had arranged themselves in protective clusters around the circular table. The ship's captain, a massive Zerian with scarred battle plates, stood at the center podium. His voice carried the weight of barely contained fear. "We have confirmed the presence of an unauthorized entity aboard this vessel," he announced, his primary eyes scanning the crowd while his secondary eyes monitored the exits. "Intelligence suggests we may be harboring a Deathworlder." The chamber erupted in alarmed, chittering, clicking, and harmonic wails. I watched in fascination as various species displayed their fear responses, color changes, defensive posturing, release of pheromones that made the air thick with anxiety. Ambassador Vexhi stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Captain, surely you cannot be serious." "The screening protocols have been compromised," the captain interrupted. "We're dealing with something that can perfectly mimic our biosignatures, our speech patterns, even our pheromone outputs." The paranoia spread like a plague through the ship's corridors over the next several hours. I observed it all with growing amusement, moving between groups and listening to their increasingly frantic theories. In the hydroponics bay, I overheard 2 Keth technicians discussing the legendary horrors of Deathworld species. "They say these beings can survive in toxic atmospheres, withstand radiation that would liquefy our organs," one whispered, his 6 limbs trembling as he tended to the food cultivation systems. "Their skeletal structure is impossibly dense, their muscle fibers wound so tight they can generate crushing force with minimal effort." His companions, breathing slits, sealed shut in terror. "I heard they can enter a berserker state where pain only makes them stronger. Their primitive brains release combat stimulants that would kill any civilized species." I pretended to adjust my datapad while recording every delicious detail. The lift shaft carried gossip upward and downward as I moved between decks, each floor adding new layers to the growing mythology of the creature supposedly stalking their halls. Security checkpoints appeared overnight, turning routine movement through the ship into an ordeal of scans, biometric confirmations, and nervous interrogations. I submitted to each one with practiced docility, allowing their sensors to read the carefully crafted false signatures I projected. The guards, a mix of different species united in their terror, handled their weapons with the jittery desperation of prey animals. At checkpoint 7, a Drachmor sergeant pulled me aside for additional screening. "Your stress pheromones are unusually low," he observed, his serpentine tongue flicking out to taste the air around me. "Most of the crew are registering fear responses." I manufactured a nervous laugh. "I suppose I'm just tired. The whole situation feels surreal." He studied me for a long moment before waving me through, but I caught him speaking urgently into his communicator as I walked away. The web of suspicion was tightening, but they were looking for a monster, not the quiet observer who had been sitting among them all along. The diplomatic quarters became echo chambers of escalating dread as rumors transformed into accepted fact. I found myself invited to a clandestine gathering in Ambassador HFY's suite, where the senior representatives had gathered to share intelligence and coordinate their response. The room reeked of fear pheromones from half a dozen species, creating a cocktail of chemical signals that painted a vivid picture of their collective terror. The coalition archives contained fragmentary reports, whispered the Zefti representative, her crystalline voice creating haunting harmonics in the enclosed space. Deathworlders who infiltrated diplomatic missions, learned our languages, our customs, our weaknesses. They are natural predators, evolved from environments so hostile that they view violence as the default solution to any problem. Ambassador HFY's primary breathing apparatus wheezed with stress. The psychological profiles suggest they're incapable of true empathy, viewing other species as either tools or obstacles. I nodded gravely, adding my own fabricated concerns to their growing catalogue of fears. The first incident occurred during the night cycle, when screams echoed through Deck 12's residential section. I arrived with the crowd of concerned diplomats and security personnel, to find one of the Keth junior staff members cowering in his quarters, pointing at scratch marks carved into the metallic wall beside his sleeping alcove. It was watching me. He sobbed, his usually precise speech patterns broken by terror. I could feel its presence, the weight of predatory intelligence studying me like prey. The captain's investigation team swarmed the area, taking readings and collecting samples, but found no concrete evidence beyond the shallow gouges in the wall plating. I studied the marks with professional interest, crude scratches that could have been made by any species with natural claws. But the frightened witnesses had already decided they were territorial markings left by their mysterious hunter. The psychological warfare was beautifully effective. By the next shift change, half the crew refused to travel the corridors alone, and the other half jumped at every shadow. I volunteered for patrol duties, offering to help maintain security during these troubled times. The breaking point came when diplomat Thanaris disappeared during what should have been a routine inspection of the cargo holds. Search teams found his communicator and ID badge abandoned near the environmental processing systems, but no sign of the diplomat himself. The discovery sparked full-scale panic among the remaining crew. Captain Zarian sealed off entire sections of the ship and instituted mandatory travel in groups of 3 or more. "The creature is hunting us systematically," he announced during an emergency broadcast to all decks. "It's studying our patterns, learning our weaknesses, picking off isolated targets." I sat in the communications center, ostensibly monitoring frequencies for distress calls, while actually observing the magnificent spectacle of civilized beings reduced to their most primitive fears. The irony was exquisite. They had created the perfect monster from their own imaginations, and now they were hunting shadows while the real threat sat among them, taking notes. Through the viewport, stars wheeled silently past, indifferent witnesses to the psychological collapse occurring within the ship's hull. The manhunt intensified as security teams swept through every compartment, scanner readings painting ghostly green overlays across their helmet displays. I joined the search parties with apparent enthusiasm, suggesting likely hiding spots and offering insights into potential escape routes. The Drakmor sergeant who had questioned me earlier paired us together for the sweep of the lower cargo decks, his reptilian features grim with determination. "Your stress levels are still anomalous," he mentioned as we moved through the shadows between shipping containers. "Either you have exceptional emotional control, or ... His sentence hung unfinished in the recycled air. I smiled in the darkness, letting my voice carry just a hint of amusement. "Or what, Sergeant?" He spun round, weapon raised, finally recognizing the predator that had been walking beside him. "You?" he breathed. The pieces fell into place behind his eyes, the too perfect calm, the helpful suggestions that had led search teams away from critical areas, the complete absence of fear while everyone else cowered in terror. I stepped closer, and he backed against a cargo container, his weapon trembling in his grip. "The thing they're looking for," I said quietly, "has been here all along." The sergeant's communication device crackled with urgent voices as he tried to activate it. but I moved with the fluid precision my species had evolved over millions of years of hunting and surviving. The device clattered across the deck as I demonstrated exactly why they called us Deathworlders. "Your people have such interesting theories about humans," I said, keeping my voice conversational as he struggled. "Some of them are even accurate." His eyes widened at the forbidden word, the designation their intelligence services had classified beyond top-secret clearance. The adaptability, the persistence, the way we bond with other species only to turn that knowledge against them when necessary. I helped him to his feet, noting how his natural weapons seemed pitiful compared to what millions of years on a hostile world had bred into human physiology. "But you missed the most dangerous trait of all. We don't just survive hostile environments, we make other environments hostile to our enemies." The realization that I wasn't planning to kill him seemed to confuse him more than if I had simply eliminated the threat he represented. The confession came during the emergency assembly in the main auditorium, with every surviving crew member gathered under the harsh artificial lights. I stood at the podium where Captain Zarian had delivered his warnings about Deathworlders, looking out at the sea of alien faces frozen in various expressions of shock, terror, and fascination. "Diplomat Thanaris is alive and unharmed in a secure location," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "as are the 3 other crew members who disappeared over the past few cycles. They're safe, comfortable, and probably sharing some very interesting conversations about interspecies relations." The admission that I had orchestrated the entire crisis sent ripples of movement through the audience. Some species fled toward the exits, while others pressed closer, drawn by morbid curiosity about the predator they had unknowingly harbored. "My species calls this psychological warfare, though your intelligence files probably use more diplomatic terminology." I gestured to the displays around the chamber, where I had uploaded the sensor logs proving my ability to perfectly mimic their biosignatures. "You've spent 3 cycles teaching me everything about your fears, your social structures, your decision-making processes under stress." The revelation continued as I explained the true purpose of my infiltration. Watching their faces cycle through the emotional spectrum of betrayal, fear, and grudging admiration, the human diplomatic corps needed intelligence about how coalition and hegemony forces would respond to perceived threats during joint operations. I said, allowing my voice to carry just enough pride to remind them exactly what they were dealing with. "This mission provided invaluable data about your tactical limitations and psychological vulnerabilities." Captain Zarian found his voice first, his scarred battleplates clicking together in what I recognized as a threat display. "You terrorized my crew, undermined our mission, violated every principle of diplomatic immunity. I demonstrated why humans earned our reputation." I interrupted. "Your people classify us as Deathworlders because we survive in conditions that would kill you. But survival isn't what makes us dangerous." I stepped down from the podium, moving through the crowd as they parted before me like water flowing around a stone. "What makes us dangerous is that we thrive by turning survival into a science, fear into a weapon, and uncertainty into advantage." The audience remained silent as I reached the chamber doors, understanding finally settling over them like a heavy blanket. The epilogue came as I transmitted my final report to the human embassy, standing in the observation lounge where this had all begun. Through the viewports, I could see the lights of the diplomatic station growing larger as we approached our destination. Behind me, the alien crew moved through their routines with new awareness, occasionally glancing in my direction with the recognition that they had been students in a masterclass they never knew they were attending. "Mission accomplished," I spoke into the secure communicator. "Target species respond to psychological pressure exactly as predicted. Recommend adjustment to diplomatic protocols based on observed fear hierarchies and decision paralysis under stress." The response came immediately. "Outstanding work. Next assignment involves the Centauri Compact. They've been particularly vocal about human expansion limitations." I smiled, already anticipating the challenges of a new hunt. After all, being a Deathworlder wasn't about the hostile environment. You came from it was about making every environment hostile to your prey. And in a galaxy full of civilized species who had forgotten what it meant to be predators, humans had found their perfect ecological niche.